Hello and welcome to the Road to Glasgow COP26 podcast. My name is Stephen Sheal. I'm one of your hosts for today, and I'll be introducing Sakshi as a co-host. Sakshi, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
Hi, Sakshi. So Sakshi's a project engineer here at the Net Zero Technology Centre, and she's also part of the sustainability team. And we asked her to co-host this podcast this morning because of the exciting topic we have to talk about. It's all about sustainability. It's all about reducing your carbon footprint. And it's actually, that's something that's close to your heart. So welcome on board. But today we've got a fantastic guest, Christian Arno, who's the founder of a company called Pawprint. Pawprint is a digital business, and it's on a mission to change the way that we look at how we actually live in terms of our carbon footprint. And it kind of like brings us full circle as well, because it involved in Pawprint Mike Berners-Lee, and we started off talking to Mike at the very first conversation that we had was with Mike Berners-Lee. So I'm delighted to introduce Christian Arno to the audience today. Christian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Excited to talk to you both.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're going to hear all about Pawprint and details, but I know that you've got tons to share, but I'd quite like to introduce Sakshi here at this point. Sakshi, do you want to come in and say hello, and then maybe kick off the conversation and ask Christian a little bit about the journey, I guess?
Yeah, hello. I'm really looking forward to this chat today. So I guess, Christian, Pawprint is your second venture, if you would like. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the journey or how you got to the idea of Pawprint?
Yeah, sure. So as you say, it's my second business, and my first business was a sort of .com for the translation industry called Lingo24, of which I'm still a board member. I guess through that journey, running that business, which was set up in Aberdeen and is still going strong, I always felt that there was something missing, that I could build a really good big translation company, but would that really have enough direct positive impact? And it sort of all dates back to me falling out with my best mate when I was 19 about how we were going to change the world. He thought that there was going to be a revolution, and I thought that you could do it through business, and I felt I couldn't do that with the translation business. And at a similar time, my dad had his epiphany around the climate crisis, sat me down. I think I was whinging about politics or something at the time, and said, you shouldn't worry about Brexit. The climate crisis is a much bigger concern for our family and for the future of humanity, without wanting to be too dramatic, but that's absolutely the case. And so then I went about thinking how I could do something. Met up with business friends in and around Edinburgh. Started to talk about what the gaps were personally and for businesses, and came up with this concept of empowering individuals, empowering people to fight climate change at home, at work and beyond. So we're very focused on helping individuals do what they can, and doing that in a way that is not judgmental, in a way that is accessible to everyone, doesn't make anyone feel bad. That's what we're trying to do.
So how does Pawprint actually work then? I mean, if I wanted to kind of engage with Pawprint, if I was concerned about my own carbon footprint, how would I go about doing that with Pawprint?
Yeah, so there are two sides to Pawprint. There's the consumer experience, and then there's the business experience, I guess, or the organization experience. And as a consumer, you just sign up, answer maybe 3 to 5 questions, minutes of questions about how you live. We've got 4 toe prints, so home, diet, travel, and other spend. And using easy sliders, you should be able to complete that and get your initial number, and compare that versus the UK average. You then go into sort of operational phase, where you try to take on actions to reduce that Pawprint, turn them into habits over time, and reduce your Pawprint. And you're rewarded with Paw points, which you can currently spend on voting for which climate-friendly charity you want us to support. So that's the consumer experience here.
So from a business point of view, what's the business model? Do I have to pay to actually do this, or as an individual, or is really, I mean, just explain a little bit how that works, because that's interesting how you've set that up.
Yes, the business version is about businesses, organizations engaging their employees in sustainability. So in the sort of simplest add-on to that consumer experience is that businesses can run challenges across their organization to help their colleagues reduce their paw prints at home and at work, and they can reward them to do that as they see fit. But there's also a lot of other stuff in the business version, and you can sort of group it into a couple of different areas. One is sort of sentiment analysis, so how the organization, the people in the organization feel about what the business is doing to reach net zero and go beyond, and what more could be done. And then the other thing is what we're calling eyes and ears. So that's the idea that every individual in the organization can submit their ideas as to what the organization could do to move further, and then receive a response as to when they're going to do those things or why not, type thing.
So we're in a quite a unique position here because Net Zero Technology Centre is actually a customer of Pawprint, and it's actually you've been at the forefront of that experience, setting it up and kind of getting people engaged in it internally. Maybe a little bit of feedback from Sakshi would be pretty good. What's our experience been like with Pawprint, Sakshi?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the app itself is really good, and we've had quite a really good sort of level of sign up as well within Net Zero Technology Centre. I think the next challenge actually is at the moment is Pawprint is a really good tool, and then it's just trying to get people to engage into it and really, you know, make it part of their lives, or like something that you do. I'm like thinking really far ahead, almost out of like muscle memory, you like logging things into it very regularly and quickly. I had a quick question for you, Christian, actually. It's maybe a little bit very specific, but do you know what inspired you or what caused your dad to have that epiphany to be, I don't know, looking into climate change and thinking about it as like a real issue? Do you know what the catalyst for that was?
That's a good question. I mean, especially for him as someone who was in the oil and gas industry, you know, he was in oil exploration in Aberdeen. So it's quite a sort of turnaround, I guess. I mean, he's always been a deep thinker and someone who's scientifically rooted. And I think in his retirement, he found time to really dig into the science and understand the full impact of what could happen to, you know, society if the worst was to happen. So.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is that I think we're trying at the moment in the sustainability team to really kind of tap into that part of people's brains, like kind of inspire them and make them think about things, even if they can just make one change, that will be enough, you know. But it's just trying to create that catalyst, and Pawprint, I guess Pawprint as an app is a really good tool for that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot in the pipeline that should help to galvanize people. One of our non-execs is a guy called Tom Sermon, who built the company that's now called Virgin Pulse, which is all about engaging employees in health and well-being. And one of their findings was that organizing people into groups that would compete against one another to, you know, tot up their 10,000 steps to go as far as they could around the world and compete with other groups as they did this really worked. So we're going to be building in leaderboards to add a bit of competitive juice to it. We're going to be improving the notifications in the tool as well. But I think there is our major challenge is how do you engage people on an ongoing basis. And one of the other innovations that we're looking at is what we're calling eco perks. And the idea here is that employers would actually finance their employees reducing their paw prints on a use it or lose it basis, on a monthly basis. So the idea there, and NZTC has not committed to this yet, and it's very embryonic as an idea, is that your employer might put aside £10, £50, £100 a month for you to, you know, have access to delicious plant-based meals, or to subsidise an electric bike, or to make improvements at home, and so on. So we are absolutely, aware that engagement topic is our number one challenge, and we are going to be relentless in our, pursuit of addressing it.
Yeah, I think engagement is the key element if you're building a community through a digital platform. Really, how to get people totally enthralled with it is the question. And I guess from a personal point of view, I like things like Strava, for example, and that's quite good on engagement actually, because it gamifies the whole thing really, and it taps into a sort of a deep-seated human need to actually share your achievements, almost like not boast about them, but to kind of like, yeah, flag them up to your friends. Look what I've done, and I think that's something maybe that touches on some of the stuff that you're talking about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think we've sort of become more aware of some of these things during the crisis, that our need to, you know, connect with other people somehow and feel part of something bigger,
Yeah,
is real.
What's fascinating to me as well is that you're a very young company. When did you start? 2019.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. Timing is everything, and I think your timing is pretty good. We're 88 days now until COP26 comes to Glasgow. In the scheme of things, that's nothing. You've been going for 2 years, and in the grand scheme of things, that's very, very young as a company. So how do you think you will engage with that whole COP experience then? Because that's a massive opportunity to get your message and your service out there.
Yeah, we've had some really amazing opportunities already present themselves from government and sort of commercial partners. So, in the lead up to, I was invited by Andrew Griffith MP, who's the government's business net zero champion, to speak to the leaders of the CEOs of the FTSE 100 companies who've signed up for the race to zero, about Pawprint, how Pawprint could help engage their employees, and that was at the stock exchange. We opened the stock market, which is astonishing for me, little me, in a 2-year-old business, as you say, to be sat up there with the chief executive of FTSE and all these other things. So definitely, as you say, our timing's been really lucky, and there are loads of opportunities. I mean, there is going to be a lot of noise around COP, so it's about how you cut through it. But what I like most about the fact that COP's happening and that it's happening so close to home is that it's bringing a real sense of urgency, which is critical. We need to move faster. And I think it's also shining a spotlight on some of the great stories that are happening in Scotland. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of experience that can be put towards the goal of net zero. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Just to get that kind of engagement with the government and also with those FTSE 100 businesses, it is, as you say, astonishing that you had that opportunity. And do you think that there'll be take up with some of those businesses, given the fact that you've had the chance to actually show what you can do?
Yeah, it was amazing because I'm used to going to conferences and being the sort of fanboy who goes up to try and speak to your heroes at the end, to try and harass these big names. And so to be in this situation where I was the little guy, but I happened to be on stage, and then you've got FTSE 100 CEOs coming up to you saying, "Can we have a chat about it?" and speak to my team. It was amazing. So yeah, I think that we've got some stuff in the pipeline there. And what we hope is that Pawprint can become effectively a standard that businesses of all shapes and sizes use to engage their people on this topic.
Okay, there's tons I'd like to talk to you about, but I'm going to zero in a couple of items. One of the things that really gets me thinking is, climate change is such a huge topic. A lot of the changes that we're seeing are basically baked in now. I mean, we can't reverse them. So what can I feel a little bit like helpless sometimes as an individual in the face of all of that. And if I was being critical about initiatives like Pawprint, I would probably say something like, it's almost like, try to fly a paper airplane against a hurricane wind. It's difficult as an individual to see how my small actions can make a difference. And I know that's the philosophy that the company has. How would you respond to that kind of thinking? Because I'm sure that you've come across it before.
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, my mum mentioned it to me over the weekend. She one of her favourite phrases is, "It doesn't matter if I, drop my plastic bottle in the sea, said me and 5 million other people," which sort of encapsulates it quite nicely. I've always believed in the power of people being greater than they think it is, and yes, some of us as individuals who are already very eco may feel, well, what difference can I make? I think what we're going to tap into increasingly once we've taken the step of educating people about their own Pawprint is to use their spheres of influence. So, the three of us on this podcast may only be three of us, but if you take the sum of all the people we know, all the people we have influence over in some way, or ability to influence, friends of friends and all of that sort of stuff, and especially through our businesses, which have huge impact to be leaders in this space and have the backing of people generally to act decisively on this, then I think we can go really far. And it's just about galvanizing people around scientifically valid information, not starting to, get too petty about things that people won't change, accept that we're all individuals, be reasonable and kind in the way that we are with one another on it, then I definitely think you start this snowball effect that is unstoppable in terms of trying to combat, as you say, the very serious situation that we're in.
Yeah, and the other thing about COP, and it touches on this subject of the individual versus big societal change. One thing about COP that kind of worries me a little bit is the actual engagement with normal people, ordinary people, because COP's really, it's all about governments talking to one another and setting targets that will have an impact on ordinary people. But how can we actually engage with just folks that want to reduce their carbon footprint? Because a lot of people might not actually have access to digital tools. And that kind of worries me a little bit when I'm thinking about it. I think most school kids probably have access to digital tools, but their parents might not have a smartphone.
Yeah.
So do we aim it at the kids, or what's your thinking on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there are quite that's a big question. There are quite a few ways in which we can start to see change across society, and someone's wealth is definitely a huge factor in terms of the things that they can reasonably be asked to change and consider doing. For people who are less well off, energy usage can be a huge one. So I know there are some great initiatives to help people conserve energy in less privileged areas, whereas people who are very wealthy, they can afford to invest a lot in being lower carbon citizens and so on. So that's important. I think one of the things we're going to be able to do through Pawprint is recognize and reward people who are doing their bit. And we've had conversations with public sector bodies around, for example, free bus passes, free access to leisure facilities for people who just measure their Pawprint, never mind what the score is, because you can get the incentivization can get a bit messy there. I think, Stephen, I'm sorry, there's it's a really big question. There are loads of answers to it. But I totally agree with you that we need to bring as many folk as possible on the journey and be considerate and understanding of the different circumstances that different folk have. Yeah.
Totally, because when I was thinking about Pawprint and engagement just with Joe Public, what struck me was during the Second World War there was a program, a national census program, where people took the temperature of people's thoughts and how they were experiencing the war, and it was a very successful exercise that gave a real kind of opened a window into the whole British society, and it helped with the construction of the National Health Service and all sorts of things. I think things like Pawprint actually almost could be like small-scale citizen science that gives data that just would not be available normally to governments to actually think about. And that could be quite exciting if we can get that kind of level of distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading over the weekend about an app called Zoe, which did something similar but related to health information around the pandemic. And if we can galvanize, millions of people to share their Pawprints and then use that for planning purposes. We've already had conversations with councils about using it to then if they see that there are a lot of people who drive to work in normal times, but are open to cycling or getting a bus or whatever, they can plan cities around the information that Pawprint helps them to harvest. So obviously we need to get to a critical mass for that to happen. Our route to market and to make our business sustainable is through businesses, but the application to society as a whole is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about schools and children, kids with their smartphones? Would that be an avenue to actually get people engaged?
Yeah, funnily enough, one of the councils we're speaking to, that's one of their preferred routes to market. There are some challenges with that around, data protection of children. Some of the content in Pawprint is maybe not appropriate for children. Like one of our challenges is around drinking local beer, which obviously a council is not going to encourage children to do, and so on. But I think funnily enough, one of my friends down here runs a zero waste supermarket called the Eco Larder, and he was saying that a lot of sort of grown-ups, sort of middle-aged men like me, who get dragged there by their kids saying, "You need to do this, Dad," sort of thing. And I think that if we can, with kids, encourage them to work with their parents and make it a family activity, that's maybe quite a nice way to do it.
Yeah,
I think that's actually quite a really good point, because it's a proven point as well. There's, just as an example, there's a project I volunteered on in Cambodia, where they were struggling to instill better agricultural practices to the farmers and local farmers to diversify the produce. And actually what the charity did was to go in through the kids. So they started teaching, or doing little allotments in the schools and teaching the kids how to plant better things. And what they then saw was that the kids were taking it home and trying to show their mum and dads or their older family, look, you can do this, you can do that. And it's changed the local area and what people are learning. It's made a massive change and a really big positive impact. So what they're seeing is that these older parents are now starting to take everything on board and create changes themselves that they wouldn't have been able to affect if a person went in and tried to tell people what to do, an older generation what to do. So it was softer and possibly slower, but it was effective and maybe more longer lasting, I would say. And it's still ongoing. It's been several years.
Very
and
cool.
They're continuing. Yeah. It's a really good way. I think we would be surprised how many kind of teenage level kids are really thinking about climate change and seeing it as like this apocalypse. And it's creating a lot of anxiety or, mental health issues as well on the back of it. There's been, I guess, on the back of Greta Thunberg, there's been a huge rising in teenager kid activists, you could call them. And, people really taking control, or kids taking control of their communities or trying to champion stuff. So it's a really good way to get in, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I think that the family angle is certainly a huge part of my motivation for doing this, and I think a lot of people's motivation. It's also interesting to think about the older generation, retired folk who maybe have a little bit of time on their hands. Maybe they can also connect with their teenage children, teenage grandchildren, or and so on. So yeah, we just need to get everyone engaged in a way that feels right, and it's about where you start and how you make sure that everyone feels motivated and empowered.
Yeah, I think personally, what Pawprint's done for me is to think I'm thinking more carefully about journey times. Using the car, and if it's within 20 minutes or half an hour of a walk,
yeah,
I far prefer now to take just to walk rather than take the car somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a positive health impact on me as well. So
definitely. The one, I'm talking about my mum and dad a lot. It shows I'm a soppy family type of person. The one that my dad harps on about in the 70s, because I think there was a shortage of oil and gas, a shortage of petrol, I should say, they brought the speed limits down to 50 miles an hour to conserve a bit more. And that's one step that maybe some people don't think about so much, that if you drive, if you need to drive, then driving much slower uses a lot less energy and is good for health as well, because there's an air quality aspect to that. So
yeah, we could all transport ourselves back to the 70s. I think that was ecologically quite an interesting era. I mean, out of ignorance, I mean, we didn't have as much plastic, we didn't use as much packaging, there weren't as many products, you didn't
not as much
drive as
traveling,
fast, not as much overseas travel.
I don't know, it's interesting that as well, because that immediately makes me think about my Norwegian grandmother, who was famously thrifty, and she'd be shocked the amount that we eat out nowadays, type thing, and the amount that we spend on stuff that you could have at home, type thing. Yeah. I don't know if that's a universal, if both of your grandmothers, would be encouraging thrift.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
My grandmothers, I think if they saw it, if they saw how much food that we threw out, they would freak, because my generation, my grandparents grew up, were in the war, Second World War. So their mentality was make, do and mend, use everything, only buy what you need, and cook the lot and eat the lot. I mean, that was it. It just shows you, it's amazing, in the space of like 50 or so years, we've actually accelerated to become this massive consumer society, and we just become totally accepting of that. And now we can't envisage not being like that. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting, but you've got some, like, I would say, more forward-thinking business leaders, like the guy who set up IKEA, and someone like Warren Buffett, who they don't have fancy cars, they drive old bangers that they've always had, live in the same house. Quite interesting. Speaking to the founder of Uni, the pizza oven company, that doing amazingly well, and they're likewise, they're not going to go and get new flashy cars. They're just driving, less. But they're driving old bangers, and I think the trend will be towards less consumption and more, and using any spare funds you've got for climate-friendly investments and maybe local experiences that don't have much environmental impact.
Yeah. So you're talking about investments, it leads me to the other area I just wanted to kind of touch on while we still have time. As a business, Pawprint obviously needs to kind of be sustainable in its own right. It needs to be financially sustainable. How easy has it been, or difficult has it been, to get people to invest in the whole business model? From a funding point of view, to get people to invest time as well, to join the board, perhaps as advisors. I'd be fascinated to touch a little bit on that while we still have a bit of time. Christian, if you could just share something there, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I was sat down with an investor I've known for a while. I've known for sort of 8 years or something. Introduced to me by Nigel Eccles of FanDuel fame a while back, and he was asking what I was planning, and I told him about this new idea, very early days. And I said to him, the elephant in the room, of course, is I'd love you to invest at the time, because he's got an amazing business brain, this guy. At the time when it's, when I'm ready, I've got a business plan and all that. And he was like, well, yeah, I'm in. And here's 25 grand and this is the valuation. And I was like, wow. And that sort of, he was the first snowball, I guess. And that sort of gave me the confidence to speak to other folk. And before I knew it, I was at 50 investors investing anywhere between 5 grand and 60 grand. And then we did crowdfunding, and then we did another round and further crowdfunding. And so we've raised about £2 million, and it's been much easier than it was in translation, for sure, because I think people see that, as you said, Stephen, at the start, it's timely. And there's also a strong emotional element to it, that people are thinking about families, they're thinking about their kids, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. And what's the ambition then? How do you see Pawprint developing over the next 2 to 3 years? What would you love to see happen?
So I'd like it to be a global standard that people talk about when they're talking about their eco impact and that of their businesses. I'd like people to know what that number is and what they're doing to bring it down. And I'd like it to be embedded and for people to feel positive about it, because they're being rewarded for doing, their best given their circumstances. about this issue that affects us all. I mean, we talked about, Stephen, you mentioned your grandparents in the Second World War. I feel like this is our World War. This is where everyone's got to come together to do their bit. And so I hope that Pawprint can help people understand what that bit is, and as I say, feel good about what they've done towards it.
Christian, do you have thoughts around how you would, go about affecting something like that on like all different levels of society? We talked about a bit around privilege of change, and then there's, I guess, attached to it, this climate privilege and just accessibility to make change, or the lack of inconvenience involved in making that change. So how I don't know if you've kind of brainstormed or thought about what that would look like if we were affecting it across all different levels of society, right from top to bottom.
Yeah, I think we've got some things. I mean, like people who are not digitally excluded are very difficult for us to reach. But what we can do is if we've got enough people using Pawprint and being involved in communicating about it through our platforms, we can start to understand what other changes need to happen to allow the whole of society to engage and have access to lower carbon products, services, and activities. I think some of that stuff probably falls without our scope, but we can, potentially influence. We're certainly looking now at how we internationalize the product and make it available to people in different countries. And there are lots of changes that need to be made to make it relevant to those folk. I think I may not be answering your question directly enough, Sakshi. I don't know if...
No, that's okay. It's just to kind of get the thoughts. It is a tough question because it is, I don't know, there's no straight answer, I suppose, and it's multifaceted, like we've talked about, speaking to kids or speaking to councils or speaking to government. So I think it's not going to be like a one-way approach. It's definitely something that you need to do a lot of things in succession or in tandem, but as long as they're connected. I think the problem is that we do things in silos, or like they're kind of not necessarily, the connectivity isn't there always.
That's right. Okay, so that's a good point, because one of the things that we're definitely looking at doing is making our information available by API to systems that people are already using. So a dream for me would be, for example, if a lot of people are using Tesco to do their online shopping, if they could see the Pawprint of dairy milk versus a plant-based milk, of steak versus beans, whatever it is, and be prompted to consider it with this sort of nudge theory, that's a way you can get to much bigger populations for sure. So
that's interesting.
Like that, yeah. And if you think about it even more widely, within public services, people seeing the impact of travel or whatever it might be, and just gradually making that information more widely, more universal.
That's a fascinating idea, actually. Can you think about all the kind of nectar points, all these various loyalty cards that are out there, and all the information that they're gathering on us as we go about our day-to-day lives shopping? That must be immense. And what a strong idea would be if you could actually tell the consumer at the till what the climate impact would be of that trolley full of food. That would be immense.
Yeah, no, we definitely want to get to that sort of stuff, and there are obviously other inspirational businesses doing similar things. So yeah.
Super. Yeah. Well, we've covered quite a lot, and I'm conscious of time. So, Sakshi, have you got sort of a final question for Christian before we sign off?
Well, I don't know, actually. It wasn't really much of a question. It might end up being deep diving into another subject, actually. But I was just going to touch on maybe like supply and demand, or if as consumers, if we create the demand for something better. The reason I was saying that is when you were saying, okay, say you could see your difference between oat milk and milk, dairy milk. Would you choose oat milk? But then what happens to the dairy farmers? Like, what, they need another business, they need something else to go on to, because then their business goes down, type thing. So but then I suppose not everyone would always choose oat milk. So I know my partner loves dairy food, so for him to change to oat milk would be a big change.
Yeah, I mean, change is a constant in society, and demand for things goes up and down. I think there are going to be people who need to change more and whose livelihoods are threatened, and that is, horrible for them and their families. but I think that the science is incontrovertible in terms of some of the changes that we need to make, and that we all need to do what's right for the greater good, and that's what Pawprint's trying to help people to do. So I think on the flip side, there will be loads of opportunities in the low carbon economy. We're doing some work with Young Enterprise Scotland, and there's a competition for the young folk there to think about what is going to be a low carbon way of, for example, consuming milk in future. Can they come up with innovations in that space and build big businesses? So,
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I didn't know that, so that's really cool to hear about, actually.
Yeah.
So that is a great point to kind of like end the podcast, I guess. It just leaves me to say thank you so much, Christian, for taking the time to come and speak with us. It's been fascinating to hear about the story of Pawprint, and also just broader societal issues that you're trying to tackle using Pawprint. And Sakshi, thank you so much for co-hosting today. It's been great to have your insight, as well as part of the team that's actually implementing Pawprint within the Net Zero Technology Centre. So I'm going to give the last word, however, to Christian, because you're the guest, so it's only mannerable. Would you like to leave us with one thought? If there's one thing that you would like to leave the listening audience with about everything we've been talking about, what would it be?
It would be, don't beat yourself up. That would be it. I think we just all need to do what we can, given our circumstances, and come together on this. So that's my parting thought.
Super, and it's a great way to end. So be kind to one another, don't beat yourself up, but do your best to make a change and make an impact. Thanks very much, Christian Arno from Pawprint.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the Net Zero Technology Centre. Our purpose is to develop and deploy technology for an affordable net zero energy industry. We want to connect people, start discussions, and generate ideas to help provide solutions for our industry. So, listen, subscribe, and if you have any questions, please get in touch with us via our website at netzerotc.com. It's an exciting time in our industry, so please take it all in and get involved.